Welcome back! Now whilst that challenge was a little more tricky than the last, hopefully you were able to score a good amount of points from it. But if not, let's find out how you could have scored more. So, just like last time, we're going to start in FMOD. We're first going to open up our sound effects folder and create a new folder, which we're going to call Enemies, in order to keep our new events nice and organised with the rest of our project. Now inside this folder we're going to be creating two 3D events. The first we're going to call Chomper Walk. Then inside the event we're going to create a multi-instrument which we're going to place at the beginning of the timeline, and also be used to play one of many walking footstep sounds we have in our project. Next we'll open up our audio bin and we're going to navigate our way to the enemies, chomper, locomotion and walk folders. Then with our multi-instrument selected in the background, we're going to shift click on all of the files inside this folder. You don't have to use all of the files, just make sure you've got a good amount of them so that every footstep will be different. Now obviously we want these footsteps to be selected at random each time we play this event. To make sure this happens, we need to consider what behavior we've set our multi-instrument to. If we click on this drop down menu here under the word playlist, you can see we have a few different behavior options. Now at first glance you might think the randomize option would be best for us. Unfortunately, with this selected, any audio file in the playlist could be played each time the instrument is triggered, which could cause a file to be played twice in a row, which is something we don't want to happen. So instead, we'll want to keep this selected as shuffle, as this will also select files at random, but will ensure each file played is different from the last. Now, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about these options and how they work, I'll have some more details for you to read through underneath this video. Now, in order to add a little bit more variety to our footstep sounds, we could also automate the pitch and the volume of this instrument randomly. To do this, with our multi-instrument selected, we simply right-click either the volume or the pitch and go to add modulation and select random. From here we can decide by how much we'd like the pitch or the volume to change by each time this instrument is triggered. So I'm going to set the pitch to about 2, maybe 3 semitones, about there. And I'm just going to quickly do the same with the volume. Just set it to about 2 decibels, 2.5 decibels. Finally, even though we're not looking too much into balancing the levels of our audio currently, I'd recommend that you turn the volume of this event down by about -13 decibels, just so that these footsteps sound a little bit lighter and quieter than the running footsteps. Of course, once your event is finished, you'll need to select the event here in the Events tab, right-click it, and assign it to the master bank. Now that we have an event for our chompers walking footsteps, we need another for when they run. Now, seeing as this event will be very similar to our walking event, we can right-click on our walking event and select duplicate, just to save ourselves some time repeating some of the things we've done here. Then all we need to do is make a few adjustments. Let's start by changing the name of the event by right-clicking and selecting rename to Chomper Run. Next, let's select our instrument and click clear on the playlist, and then replace all of the audio files with the running files instead. So let's go enemies, chomper, locomotion, open up the run folder this time, and then select all the audio inside it. Again, you don't have to use all the files, just a fair few so that each footstep sounds slightly different when this instrument is triggered. This time we're also going to change the master volume so that instead of dropping it by -13 decibels, we'll do about -10, -9 decibels. And then finally, just like we did with our first event, let's assign this one to our master bank. Then, as always, once you've finished making edits in FMOD, you'll want to build your banks with F7, and then save your project with Ctrl+S. So now we can make some edits inside Unity and look at how to trigger these events. Now that we've got our events ready, we'll want to trigger them to play whenever a chomper takes a step. So we'll start by creating a new script with a function inside of it that will play either one of our 2 new events when called. So let's make our way over to the FMOD folder we created. Let's go Assets, 3D Game Kit, let's go Scripts, FMOD, and then inside this folder we'll right click, create, C# script, and then I'm going to call my script F_chomper. Now before we attach it to anything, we're going to make edits to it first. So let's double click on it to open up our script. Once we're inside the script, we can start by deleting both the start and the update functions and creating our own by writing void and then giving it a name. Now whilst we can call this event any name we'd like, I'd recommend you call yours play step, which I'll explain why a little bit later on. Next, we're going to need 2 parameter brackets. Let's add those. And then inside these, we're going to create a variable which we'll be able to use inside our function. Now, the variable will be a string variable that will hold either the event path or the GUID of the event we'd like to play. So let's declare the variable type string, and we'll give this variable the name event. Finally, all we need to do now is give our function a body with 2 curly brackets. So now that we've got a function, we'll want to use this to play either one of our events. Now, seeing as the events are designed to be played one at a time, we can use a play one shot command to create an instance of each event, play it, and then destroy it for us, saving us from doing it manually. So inside our function, let's write FMOD unity.runtimemanager. Now later on, we'll be attaching this script to our chompers. Each one will have a copy of this script attached to it. This means that we can use the play one shot attached command to tell our event to play at the location of the object that it is attached to. So let's add play one shot attached with 2 brackets and a semicolon. The first thing we need to add to this command is the event that we'll want to play. Now, because we'll be using this command for both running and walking events, we'll want to pass a string variable into this command that can hold data for either event. So we'll use our event string variable we created inside our parameter brackets and pass it into our command. So let's write its name, event. We then need to follow this up with a game object that we'd like to play our event at. Now, as mentioned earlier, this script will be attached to each chomper, so we'll want to tell it to play the event at the location of the game object that it's attached to. So to do this, we'll separate it from our event with a comma and write game object with a lowercase g. And now that our script is set up, let's save it and take a look at how we'll use it in Unity. Back inside Unity, we'll want to start looking at how we're going to attach our script to the chompers. Now, to save us from manually selecting each one, we'll want to attach the script to the chompers prefab, so that every time one is loaded into our game, the script is attached and loaded in with it. So to find the prefab for the chomper, you'll want to make sure you're in your project tab, and you'll want to navigate your way through the following folders. You'll want to go Assets, 3D Game Kit, Prefabs, Characters, Enemies, Chomper, and here you are, you can see the prefabs here. So once you've found it, select the Chomper prefab and then click Open Prefab in the Inspector tab. Now, making sure that the Chomper parent object is selected in the Hierarchy tab, you'll want to scroll down the Inspector tab and come down to where it says Add Component. Then from here, we just type in the name of our script, f_chomper, and select it so that it's now attached to that object. Then let's quickly save our project with Control S, and then if we go back to our scene and select one of the chomper enemies in this scene, scroll down the Inspector tab, we can see our script is attached to it. We can also click on another, and we can also see the script is also attached to it. The last thing we need to do is tell our function inside our script when to trigger. Now, because we want it to play whenever the chomper takes a step, we'll need to use the animations of the chomper that take steps and use them to trigger it. So to find those animations, you'll need to navigate your way through the following folders. Go Assets, 3D Game Kit, Art, Animations, Animation Clips, Characters, Enemies, Chomper. And here you can see a list of the animations that the chomper can perform. So let's start with the chomper's walking animation, which should be at the end of this list. As you can see here, if I click on it, it says chomper walk forward. So select the animation and then scroll down the Inspector tab until you find a tab labeled Events. So just like we did with our player's character, we'll be using animation events to trigger our function in our script and play our audio. Now, if we open up the Events tab by clicking on the arrow, you'll actually notice on the timeline that there are already markers placed on it. Now these were placed here by the developers of the 3D game kit to trigger audio when the chomper takes footsteps. So in order to save ourselves some time placing down markers for each step in the animation, we may as well use the ones already provided to us. Now if we click on one, you may notice that these events have already been told to play a function called play step. Again, this was put here by the developers as they too have created a function called play step to play audio with. Now this is why we called our event play step 2, so that we could use these pre-placed markers to call our function. So the only change we need to make to these markers is to add an event path or GUID to the string section so that we can tell the play step function which event we want it to play. Now since we're inside Unity's editor, we can access the path of the event we want to play by clicking on the FMOD tab and selecting the event browser. Then let's open up the events folder and go sound effects, enemies, and select the event we want to play, which in this case is Chomper Walk. Then all we need to do is click the copy button, come over to the string section, and paste it in. Now all we need to do is repeat this for the rest of the markers. So once you've pasted the event path into all of the markers, all you need to do now is hit apply, and that will save the changes you've made to the animation. Next, we'll do the same for the run animation. So once you've selected it in your inspector tab, come down to the events section and again, select the play step markers, select the Chomper Run event, copy the event path and then paste it into the string section. Once you've done that, hit apply. Finally, the last animation we need to add footsteps to is the idle animation, which can be found next to the run animation. Now for this animation, not only are there a lot of markers, but some are not being used to play our footsteps. So we'll have to make sure the name of each one we select says play step. We'll also want to make some room and stretch out the inspector tab as much as we can, as some of the markers, as you might be able to see here, overlap a little bit. We don't want to miss any of them, otherwise we could get errors in our console tab. So for the idle animation, we're going to add the Chomper Walk footsteps to the markers. So let's copy the event path and let's select some markers. So this one says play step, so I can paste the event path in here. Now this one says grunt, so I'm going to leave that blank and just try to focus on the play step markers. Now again, make sure you've added the path to all of the markers called play step. Once you think you've done that, hit apply. And with that, we've added our 2 events to all of the appropriate animations. Now that covers most of the criteria points for this challenge, but now it's time to address the bonus point. So let's quickly play our scene and see how it sounds. So whilst our chompers are now making footstep sounds, the problem is they sound a little bit messy, and this is because there are too many footsteps playing at once. Well, in order to fix this, we'll need to limit the amount of times each event can be played at a single time. We'll have to go back into our events in FMOD to fix this. The first thing we'll need to do is select the master track on one of our events, and then make our way down to the event macro section in the bottom right corner. Here we have a few options for how many times our event is played. And the first thing we want to do is limit the amount of instances of the event that can be played at the same time. Now I found a sensible amount for this was about 10, so I'm going to adjust mine just to about 10, there we go. Once we've done that, we also need to then set a stealing option. Now, when the max amount of instances has been reached inside of our game, but another is told to play by our script, this option will determine which instance will be told to stop in order to make room for the new one to play. Now, I personally like the quietest option for our footsteps, as this will tell whichever instance is playing at the lowest amplitude to stop playing in order to make room for the new footstep. Now, once you've changed these settings for both the walk and the run events, go ahead and build your banks again and save your project. And then back in Unity, we can go ahead and test our scene again. Now, as you should be able to hear, the footsteps don't sound too overwhelming this time. There's not too many playing, but it does sound believable to the amount of movement that the chompers are making. So just like the last time, count up all of the criteria points you were able to hit to give yourself a score out of 5. Now if you're not happy with your score, feel free to go back over the lessons we looked at in Module 2 and see if you can improve on the things you missed out on. Once you feel you're ready, head on over to Module 3.